The Power of Ted by David Emerald. This is the foreword by Lisa Lahey. She quotes Mary Oliver. "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Mary writes, "I've shared Oliver's line with many people over the years, and when I do, there are three observations that emerge. One, people agree on one point. Each of us has one life. Two, people tend to respond positively or negatively to the quotation. Few people respond neutrally. Three, within those two reactions, there is significant variation in why people feel as they do. Some people are delighted by the question's reminder that their lives are in their own hands, while for others, it is a novel but wonderful idea that they could actually plan to do something with their lives. Other people feel ashamed of not being able to answer the question, and others are angry with the presumption that they can plan their lives. Still, others laugh at the word precious, feeling quite clear that there is nothing precious about their lives at the moment. Instead, life feels like a weight, a fight, or worse. Some feel so beaten down that they say it seems foolhardy to even imagine being in charge of their own lives. You may have had another reaction. I've come to see people's responses to these 16 simple words as a window into two essential ways we see ourselves and our lives. Broadly speaking, one way is to see ourselves at the mercy of those around us, and the other is to see ourselves as having agency over our lives. We can move back and forth between these two mindsets, though people seem to operate predominantly from one or the other. As if it wasn't enough of a burden to experience oneself at the mercy of others, I've noticed that many people who feel this way are also suffering, feeling stuck, thinking badly of themselves, often quietly, though some people cover that up with their anger, and are almost always on their own by themselves. They find it hard to ask for help for many different reasons, including not admitting to themselves that they need help and not wanting to appear weak by asking for help. Asking for help is hard. After all, we live in a culture in which tacit message is that we ought to be able to handle such challenges ourselves. This notion is mistaken. As a developmental psychologist, I can tell you that our individual development needs to be nurtured and that an ideal environment is one that both supports and challenges us. Too often, we go without both of these conditions. If I could wave the proverbial magic wand on behalf of each of us becoming our best selves, I would make it so we could ask for help and we could do so before things go terribly wrong, or before we feel overwhelmed and excessively stressed from being in over our heads. Without someone else's perspective, we tend to go around and around, repeating our default patterns and getting nowhere, except perhaps to feeling worse about ourselves for lack of progress. Help is here in this gem of a book, in this short, fast-paced, and wisdom-packed parable. Emerald takes us by the hand and lovingly shows us how our psychological default is to operate unconsciously from a state of fear and to take on different drama-based roles as a result. He helps us to see how living out of fear not only keeps us small, but creates a dynamic in which we keep others small as well. In other words, we limit our own potential as well as the people around us. We lose a connection to our vision and purpose. Emerald helps us understand the variation of people's responses I've described here, and how any of us can move from believing and reinforcing the belief that we have no agency in our lives to a belief that we are the only ones who are in charge of our lives. Because this is countercultural. I want to repeat that developing our capacity to take responsibility for our lives is an achievement that needs to be cultivated. If we did so, we would be able to use our one wild and precious life to create something meaningful. We would be available to support one another and other people to do the same. And together we might intentionally participate in our communities, in our home, our work, our neighborhoods, to do something bigger than any of us individually could. Dare I say that we could together create peace? If all this sounds lofty and impossible, let me say it this way. If we could develop our capacity to plan and live our lives fully, we would feel less like victims, helpless to solve the problems other people make for us. We would no longer feel exhausted from fighting, feeling badly about ourselves for not fighting back, or for believing that we are not good enough. We would have energy to create more of the life we want. So read this book. Let Emerald take you by the hand. Remind yourself that he has walked this very path, as have I. And go find the community, even if it is just one other person, to provide you with what you need, want, and deserve. Here's Mary Oliver again, quote, "When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms." And that was written by Lahey. She's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard Graduate School of Education, Minds at Work. I'm going to continue on to the preface. It's about the 10th anniversary edition, and then the next video will be chapter 1. Quote, "This book changes lives," unquote. That message has been communicated countless times over the past decade through emails, during workshops, at speaking events, in online book reviews, and in casual encounters when people learn that I am the author of TED. And countless times I have been left almost speechless. I will share the reason why in a minute. From all reports, TED has impacted marriages, improved relationships between parents and children, informed premarital counseling, and healed multi-generational family drama. It has been used in middle school and high school curricula, in college social work and psychology classes, in addition, treatment programs and groups, in diabetes, education, and other chronic health challenge situations, in community poverty outreach and training programs, and in church youth and book study groups. It's been beneficial for the community of Rwandan immigrants who fled the United States after their country's 1994 genocide and their work of reconciliation between Hutus and Tutsis. TED has been widely deployed in leadership, academias, by leadership teams and organizations, and has become the cornerstone of company cultures. And these are only examples that have been brought to our attention. There are others we do not know of. Here's one illustration. A gentleman who looked to be in his early 40s stopped by our book table at a recent conference. "I've been looking forward to meeting and thanking you for writing this book. It saved my marriage." He proceeded to tell me a story of sitting in a hotel room in his hometown, estranged from his wife, holding a book a friend had given him, recommending he read it that night. He laid down on the bed, he said, and didn't get up until he was done reading The Power of TED. The next day he called his wife, apologized for his part in the drama of their marriage, and said he wanted to create a new relationship. I didn't know what to say or do, so I did and said what I have so many times. I stood, shook his hand, put my hand on my heart, and said, "Thank you. I'm so grateful that TED has touched your life." Beyond that, I am nearly speechless in such encounters because I often don't feel worthy of the praise simply because, like everyone else, on a daily basis, I too am seeking to live the principles and practices contained in this story of David and Ted and Sophia walking and talking along the shore where surf meets sand and where the human experiences meet our spiritual essence. You see, the ways of thinking, relating, and taking action contained in this book changed my life as well and continue to. For me, the old adage is true. We teach what we most need to learn. The story behind the story. The time has come to share a little of the genesis of what eventually became The Power of TED. At a critical time in my life, I faced all of the realities that the character David faces in the story. While working with a psychotherapist, a healthy choice when facing such challenges in life, I learned about the Karpin drama triangle and its roles of victim, persecutor, and rescuer. Then, one fateful morning, as I was sitting engaged in my morning quiet time ritual, a practice of some combination of inspirational readings, prayer, silence, and contemplation, a moment of surrender surfaced, and silently I said to the God of my understanding, I am ready to relinquish my victim stance in the world, but I need to know, what is the opposite of victim? Immediately the word creator came into my awareness. While I did not actually hear a voice, I can understand how some could say they do. My eyes flew open and I drew a deep breath. It was an utterly unexpected personal epiphany. That morning began the journey that eventually led to TED. Looking back, many seemingly miraculous meetings and events took place. Too many to detail here. I can attest to the famous observation made by W.H. Murray, the Scottish Himalaya expedition of 1951. Quote, "The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision which no one could have dreamed would have come their way." Unquote. Among them for me was learning of the work of Robert Fritz. Shortly after my morning epiphany and engaging in his technologies for creating, and then, not long after, meeting Bob Anderson, my dear friend and colleague for now over a quarter century, who through our shared passion for leadership development introduced me to the mindsets and models of the orientations contained in the story, and over a dozen years ago meeting Donna Zagrznok, my wife, business partner, and the mom of TED, who first encouraged me to take that personal epiphany and begin to share it with others. Given my more than 3 decades of community and organizational communication, leadership, and organization development, it would have been easy to write a more traditional, nonfiction leadership book. And for those for whom such an approach might be more appealing, I suggest you start with the appendix, which contains a narrative outline of the concepts contained in the story. Instead, the spirit of TED intervened. The call was to write a fable about self-leadership, for this is what I have come to learn, a lesson I am reminded of almost daily. The way we lead our own lives has everything to do with the quality of leadership we bring to our most important relationships, our families, our organizations, our communities, and now, more than ever, our world. As I write, our human family seems to be careening toward the ultimate choice point. We will continue to downward spiral of fear, reactivity, and drama, or stop, pause, and choose to upgrade our way of being in relationship with one another as creators capable of honoring and respecting our essential unity with all its splendid diversity. It starts with me and you and how we lead our own lives. My prayer is that TED touches and enriches your own life so that in turn you can help others. That's written by David Emerald, who is the author of our book. On to chapter 1.